entertain a motion at 7:21 to come out of recess at this time.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call.
Yes.
Mr. McGee, Mrs. O'Hara, Mr. Zalinski,
Yes.
Mr. Biragad.
Yes. 7.
Mr. President, my apologies for the mix-up. Thank you for allowing us to proceed. Mrs. Nagle, would you call the roll?
Yes, Mrs. Bartolini. Here. Mrs. Randall. Here. Mrs. Sharon. Here. Mr. Hurd.
Here.
Mr. Forty.
Here.
Mrs. Vada. Here. Mr. Vadney.
Here. Thank you. You want me to stop back at the beginning? Mr. President, members of the council, allow me to introduce the other members of the Charter Review Commission. Christine Charis, Tracy Mangle, Carol Drainville, Terry Bonamioli, Peg Vada, Larry Forty, and Tony Gurton. And I would like to thank them for their commitment over the last year to this process of reviewing the charter. In the approximately 1 year from the beginning of this commission's work till today, there have been many new and exciting changes that have taken place. Among them is a new town council, town administrator, some department heads, new school committee, new superintendent in town government, 2 grandchildren, 1 wedding, and an ordination on this committee. The charter is a document that is the framework of how the town of North Smithfield decides its own governmental organization and powers. It gives guidance so that a system of appropriate and efficient checks and balances ensures the effective management of the town. In reviewing the town charter at almost 50 years old, the commission found a rather well-served document that has guided the town with few major changes over the years. The most noted was going from a financial town meeting to the process used today, that of the council setting the budget. However, in recent years, some changes have been approved on a limited scale without fully vetting out how those changes impacted other articles or sections within the charter. Our review was a comprehensive review of the entire charter, all articles and sections included. We found issues that were not consistent throughout the charter, sometimes contradicting itself or the ordinance of the town, or being unclear or vague as to the meaning. As part of our review, we met with department heads, elected officials, appointed officials, held 2 public hearings for input. As we tried to address those concerns and issues, we relied on not just their suggestions, but other charters throughout the state and the country as reference points as to how to achieve those needs. The challenging part of the process was separating the people serving from the positions they occupied. We looked to see how or what the position entailed and tried to determine our vision for that position, regardless of who would be serving in that position, either by election or appointment. Any recommendations made are not a reflection of those having served or those serving now. There are several types of changes we are recommending. Some are corrections or inaccurate words, like the reference to a town manager that we had never had. Some are updates that are there that they reflect changes in state law. Some are changes to reflect what is actually taking place in our government today. And some are a paradigm shift of ideology. As we review the charter, we will identify what the changes are and the reasons for the recommendation. And we're going to show the charter up on the big screen so everybody can see it, and it should be easily seen by everybody. All changes that we're recommending be deleted are redlined. New additions are in blue, so you'll be able to follow. And when we're done with this, you'll all get a copy of it. To be honest with you, I didn't want to give it to you so you'd be on page 30 when we're on page 5, in all fairness. And the town clerk does have an electronic copy, so if people are requesting it, they can get it, at a later date. Mr. President and members of the council, I have encouraged the other commission members to voice their opinions as well as we go through this, so it's not just my voice that you hear.
Keep it nice and informal.
You want to scroll?
And as we just scroll through this, Section 5 ordinance, we read this, and when we actually met with the town solicitor a couple of times, we didn't really understand what this said, and we tried to find a way that we could word this so it was more easily understood. by anybody reading it. And so what we did is, we eliminated section 5 of the ordinance. Continue to the next page. And we eliminated this language in the general powers. It kind of said the same thing as the other one. And we added new language to section 8 of the legislative powers. I'm going a little too fast here.
Can you slow down a little bit?
Is this bothering you?
I can't read
You're not a speed reader?
it.
So we eliminated the language in 5 and 7, and we added new language to number 8, legislative powers, that would entail those two deletions when we added what we needed to add, so that it was more easily understood.
So we basically thought that those two parts basically said that you had to follow the state constitution. And when we met with Mr. Yocchi, he confirmed that. He said, this is all covered under the state constitution, so we don't need to restate it within the charter. We just rely on the state constitution, which always supersedes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the elections, this could be, I don't really say it's a big shift. It's where everyone seems to be going. It's at the federal level, it's at the state level, and we believe that it should be in the town level as well. Term limits, that all elected officials shall serve terms that do not exceed 8 consecutive years.
What crazy person would want to serve more than 8 consecutive years?
Expert guy who can help himself. It will help you.
Tried and tried.
Next item was on the recall, and we added language in the recall for reasons that could be listed, potential reasons that could be listed, and we did that for 2 reasons. One was to be consistent with removal further on in the charter, and it had these same reasons. So we felt to be consistent in the charter, we would put the same reasons for recall as for reasons for removal of the people who work for the town.
And also because previously there was no reason, right? It was just,
Correct.
you can just recall. So we felt like there should.
You could recall because you didn't like the color of someone's hair.
Legitimate reason for a recall.
The next one, it appears enlisted. That was a change that we put on there based on comments that we got from the town clerk's office about how they run elections and check signatures. And then the last change that we made in recall was, it used to say there were 30% of all registered voters in the town, and we're recommending that it go to 30% of the votes cast in the most recent election for the office, held by that official named in the petition. The reality is 30% of the town doesn't even vote in an election, for the most part. So it's really, to hit the recall, you're trying to, for a threshold that's almost impossible to hit. And so we felt that, and based on what we read in other charters, this was something that was out there, 30% of the most recent election of the votes cast. So that's the recommendation that we're making. Okay, Board of Canvassers, for whatever reason it said the Board of Canvassers were elected. They've never ever been elected in the town, it's always been appointed, so that's one of those changes that this is actually what takes place, they're appointed. And then in conversation that we've had, again with the town clerk, there were times where she has trouble convening that board with a quorum to address things, and so Title 17 of the state law, Rhode Island general law, allows you to have 2 alternates, so we've added that language to this so that they can be alternates to the Board of Canvassers, so that they can meet when they need to meet if there's not a quorum. The Budget Committee, we added language to clarify the issue. The Budget Committee, we shall act in an advisory capacity only. There seem to be some issues, and some of this is maybe corrections that need to be made because the language hadn't really been changed a lot from when it went from a financial town meeting the process we use today. And at that time, even though the budget committee was advisory, then it seemed to have more clout in the town. And now they're more advisory to the town council. Submission to the budget to the council. We're trying to get a nice timeline going with this that is a doable timeline that makes sense. And this is one of those things that contradicts itself within the charter. When it's submitted in two different sections, it says different dates. One says the first Monday of June and one says the third Monday of May. So we're making it the second Monday of May is when the budget is submitted to the council. And you'll see further on when we get the whole timeline, and we'll explain it as we get to that, what the whole timeline entails. Capital budget considerations. This change is being recommended based on comments from both the planning board and the budget committee, that to do capital budgeting, they didn't have the resources or the manpower to do those things. So in looking at other charters, they have this asset management commission that they've created, and we'll see that further on in other boards and commissions. You'll actually see what that entails. So the capital budget would be considered by the Asset Management Commission, which is a committee that council would appoint. And then a public hearing on the budget would be at least 14 days prior to adoption of the budget, so that there's time between when you have to act on a budget and you have a public hearing. You can't have a public hearing at 7 o'clock at night and make the budget at 8 o'clock at night. That's not, we didn't think that was fair to the people in town. And again, that's part of the timeline adjustment. Town council, we're making a recommendation that the town council go to 7 members, 4-year terms, with staggered terms, 4 and 3 staggered terms. We're recommending in here that in the election year 2020 that take place, because we had to put a date in there. You could do it in 2018 if you wanted to, but the language that's there is what's used for the school committee. When the school committee went over to an elected board and they had staggered terms. It's our recommendation that we do that for a number of reasons. One of the biggest reasons is continuity. You'll never have a whole board change over in one shot. You know, there's always going to be some way over there. So, and with a 4-year term, you'll have continuity where you can actually get traction and get things going. And you also have the ability to create subcommittees that could handle issues within the council itself. The qualifications, what we've redlined out of there is actually unconstitutional. The state and federal government can't be used, so it was unconstitutional. And then we added the language that no council member shall hold any paid employment in the service of the town, nor be eligible to accept any such employment for a period of 1 year following the expiration of the term for which he was elected. Obviously, the quorum would become 4. With a 7-member board, the quorum would become 4. And then on the meetings, it's our recommendation that we go to, the council have actually, it's listed that you have 2 meetings a month as opposed to 1 meeting and 1 special meeting. You would have 2 meetings a month where you could take care of the town's business every 2 weeks or twice a month, whether that's paying bills or taking other actions, as opposed to right now where you can only do that, really pay bills once a month. So by doing it twice a month, you'd have 2 meetings, which is actually what's taking place today. And then at the end of that, talks about executive session, and provided that all votes are taken in public is no longer the law anymore. So we put in pursuant to the Rhode Island Open Meetings Act. And again, that's based on the conversation that we had with the solicitor. And then under the powers of the town council, we're changing the word compensation to say that to establish by ordinance the salaries and benefits that may be paid to all elected and appointed officers and employees. And that's so that there's consistency throughout the charter. It changes all over from section to section, whether it says compensation, salaries and benefits. And so we put it into this, the recommendation is that throughout the charter, wherever it mentions salary, compensation, or whatever, it's salaries and benefits set by ordinance. So it's consistent throughout, and then, because we've been investigating this, we found that there's different parameters for different people, depending on when they were hired and what job they do, and so we need to try and get it so it's lined up, and that it's all lined up, so consistency throughout the town. And then number 23, town council alone shall have the authority to ratify all contracts and collective bargaining agreements negotiated for the town, including all collective bargaining agreements under school committee jurisdiction after a public hearing. Now, that was one that even I was I didn't like the fact that the council could ratify a school committee's contract. They have authority, but in doing the investigation and looking into things and everything, we felt that this was a good checks and balance that was put in place, that the school committee is still negotiating their contracts with their collective bargaining units. They're still signing off on the contract, it's just the council is ratifying it. And the council is the taxing authority. So in essence, you guys control the purse string, so we felt this was a good checks and balance that was in there. And then again, on number 24, it's becoming 4 because if you go to a 7-member board, it should become 4. And again, in the same place here. Probate court, in discussion that we had with the town clerk, there have been times where she has trouble getting a probate judge. And even though it says that the town solicitor shall serve, she still had a problem with that. So we've added the language that the town council shall appoint an auxiliary probate judge to serve as the acting judge, should the probate judge have to disqualify himself. And further on, you'll see in here that you can make the solicitor be that probate judge. He's allowed to do that by charter. So you can still do that, but we needed to put it in there because it wasn't there before. It wasn't happening. That there were times where you couldn't have probate court. And again, the town council shall determine and fix the salary by ordinance of the judge of probate for consistency.
Can you back up, Paul? So, number 5, the clerk of probate court shall be the town clerk. It's always been that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's always been that way.
Yes. But there have been times where she couldn't get a judge because the judge has a client in probate, so he can't serve as the probate judge.
I know the judge down here.
The town administrator, we're recommending a 4-year term for the town administrator, and for whatever reason, it's been listed in there that we have them on odd numbered years. By charter, there should have been an election this year for town administrator. So we changed that to odds to evens, but even looking at that, the last part of that sentence, I think needs to be changed, because if you go to a 4-year term, it's not the next even year. So that language needs to be adjusted. And the other day when I was speaking with you guys at the council meeting, I said we would need to meet with the solicitor to make sure language is all right and everything. I'm not sure how to word that, but there was actually 2 changes that are made. One needs to be, even if you don't go to a 4-year term, you need to make them in even numbered years, the election of the town administrator. So there are actually 2 separate changes there, but if one goes through, you got to change the language for the other one. Compensation, $10,000 number was an old number, and we just put what's currently paid to them, and we put again, it's salaries and benefits by ordinance. Powers and duties, enforce or cause to be enforced, the charter. There's nowhere in the town that we could find who says who enforces the charter. So it's our recommendation that town administrator enforce the charter. His last duty, shall attend all regular meetings of the town council. To be honest, we looked around to see what other communities do, And my response was, I don't care what other communities